excited to continue this conversation this afternoon as we get to talk with Andrea here in a little bit. Before we get there, I just wanted to say thanks again for joining us, for engaging with us live if you're watching at noon, or maybe engaging with us a little bit later in the evening, or wherever or whenever you may be watching this. We're just thankful that you're engaging in this conversation with us, thinking through what it looks like to really live out that SEND acronym. And maybe you're not sure what that SEND acronym stands for. No worries. SEND is really just a call to increased focus vision on our increased focus on our vision as a church to build joy-filled communities of faith. And so the way we're doing that is we're serving the city, encouraging generosity, nudging steps, and deploying disciple makers. Thinking through what does that look like, even in this season, and what are the kind of some of these stories of the people in our congregation? How are they living that out? So that's what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. That's what we've been talking about, and it's been amazing. And so as we jump in today, we're going to be focusing on that D letter, deploy disciple makers. And really, I think discipleship is really just that life-on-life interaction where you're investing in one another's life, pouring into someone, and maybe even redeeming those natural spaces God's given you, right? Like oftentimes we can think of discipleship as this added-on thing to the craziness that life is, but really discipleship means it could be just redeeming those natural spaces. And so before we get there and get into that conversation, I just want to turn to a passage that we've been kind of thinking through that frames a little bit of what discipleship looks like for us as a community and as followers of Christ. And it's 2 Timothy 2:2, and it's Paul writing to Timothy, who, Paul's been investing in Timothy's life, and now he's kind of encouraging him to continue to invest in the lives of others. And this is what he says: "And what you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." And you can kind of just see this ripple effect of information passed down, right? As Paul's poured into Timothy, and then Timothy's going to pour into others, and then those others are going to pour into others. And that's kind of our hope with discipleship, is that these things that we're learning, that we're journeying with, that we'd be able to pass on to others so that they could come to know ultimately Jesus and find joy in him. And so with that being said, I'm going to invite up Andrea to share a little bit about her story of how she's been able to kind of have some of those conversations in this season and in other seasons. Andrea, say hi.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you. Thanks for being here
Good to be
and
here.
joining us. I'm excited to have a little bit of a conversation of what that looks like, what it looks like to maybe redeem those natural spaces. But before we get there, a quick question. How long have you been a part of our Vintage Grace community for?
Well, my family moved to the Folsom El Dorado Hills area about 3 years ago, and we did a little tiny bit of hopping around and looking at churches and joined Vintage Grace shortly thereafter. So yeah, we're coming up on the 3-year mark.
Awesome. Hey, me too. Me too. So
Awesome. Yay.
that's super cool. And so we've been at 9-3 Lane ever since we've been here. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Yep.
right. I never knew anything else.
We didn't know Marina. Yeah. So I'm in the
No.
same boat as you. Well, cool. Well, hey, we've gotten the chance to talk a little bit before, going live and having an offline conversation about kind of the spaces you're finding yourself in, and thinking through what does it look like to be discipling in those spaces. And so I kind of just wanted to start off our conversation by asking you, what are some of those natural spaces that you find yourself in, that you've invited others to journey with you?
Yeah. So for me, it actually started last summer. After having moved here and being new in the area, you kind of get over that initial hump of like, oh my goodness, everything is new. And then I found myself in this, I kind of would like friendships. And also, I really had some places where I wanted to grow and develop as a person. And I know about myself personally that I don't really do that well when I'm all by myself. And so I talked with Jackie Adams at church, and as she's kind of coached me along, and shared with her that I had this idea of like inviting other friends in with me to meet goals and just to have a group and a space where me and friends could be for each other and be real with each other, more than just a coffee date, more like how are we pushing one another forward toward being good wives, good mothers, good whatever it is, just growing in life and being intentional. And so for me, I was like, how do I find that? And I issued an invitation to a few friends and said, hey, this is what I need and what I want in my life. You seem like somebody who maybe wants it too. Would you be interested? And sure enough, there were people who were, and they came along, and that started late last summer, early fall, and we've been meeting together ever since and connecting. And really, it has become a place where I'm not really leading out, but we're like iron sharpening iron and connecting with each other. And sometimes we're
Yeah.
shooting the breeze, and sometimes we're getting really real with each other and just being like, this is what's actually happening. Can you help me? Can you pray for me? Can you speak truth to me? And it's been really good, especially for me, and I think for the other women who are in that group.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
cool to hear. Yeah, and I love that mentality of ironing, sharpening iron, right? Like we have much to gain in these relationships as much as we have to give, right? Like we allow people
Yeah.
to pour into us as we pour, into them, and just kind of that mutual relationship that's happening there. And so, what does that space look like now, like in this season?
Yeah, so with Shelter in Place, there's a little bit of backstory there. So with this group, we'd gotten together kind of at the beginning of the year, and of course had like the what is your New Year's resolution? Do you do New Year's resolutions? And
Yeah.
for me personally, 365-day goals are a
Mm-mm.
big no. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, nope, I'll be done on January 2nd. So I heard about this challenge called the Six Goals for 60 Days Challenge. And this guy was like, you're going to do these crazy things for six, not super crazy, but just like you're taking care of yourself. And so I told my group, I said, I'm going to do this. One of the goals was even like taking cold showers. And I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. So my friends were not on board, especially when I mentioned 60 days of cold showers, which I didn't stick to, by the way. I did other things. But anyway, I think that they kind of watched me for 60 days, like, is she going to survive? And lo and behold, I managed to just progress and do it and make it through 60 days of being consistent with six goals. And so when I came to the end of my 60 days, I was like, okay, I survived. Would you guys be interested in trying this with me? And they said yes. So we got to talking about like when we wanted to start. And then in the midst of all of that, the entire world starts shutting down. And I'm like, do we stick with 60 days? Do we not? What are we going to do? And they were still on board, and I was still on board. And then what was really neat was they told friends and I told friends. And so now there's like more than just the four of us who were interested in
Mm,
doing this. There's like a group of 10 or 12 women who, even though we're sheltered in place and by ourselves, we're saying these are six things I really want to try to accomplish
mm,
in my quarantine life for the next 60 days. And we're from different places in the United States. We're all just connecting and saying, here's how I'm keeping my goals. Some people are reading their Bible, some people are drinking more water, some people are getting exercise, but we're all stepping in and saying, hey, how can I encourage you? How can I support you? How can I keep it real with you at this time? And it's been a neat space to say, okay, everything feels a little bit out of control, but for these 60 days and these six things, we're going to just try to do this together.
yeah. That's so cool, and it's cool to see. Like that would have been a very easy thing for you to do on your own, right? You could have been like, "Here's my six goals. I'm gonna do it in 60 days,"
Yeah.
and like you could have just kept that very to yourself. But you're like, well, this would probably be more enjoyable to do with others, and for the accountability sake, right? There's like both those parts there, but like, and now it's kind of
Exactly.
evolved. Like people have seen, oh wow, like yeah, like she actually did it, and there's transformation, and I kind of want to be a part of that. And so it's like kind of this, come along with me, like, and we'll do it together, and which
Yeah.
is I think is very, that's what discipleship is, just kind of like come along with me where you're at as we're going, right? Like that kind of language, and it's so cool to hear. Well, what did kind of some of those invitations look like when you invited those people to journey with you?
Sure. Well, I definitely had to kind of get over that sense of like, is this going to be weird? Is this going to be awkward? Does anybody else think like I think? And it really just came down to holding my plan with open hands and being like, it's okay if people say no or if they say yes, and really hopeful and prayerful that somebody would want to join with me. But it was fun to discover that other people were interested, that they wanted what I wanted. And we actually had some people who joined the original group and realized that maybe the group wasn't for them, or that kind of group wasn't for them, or this season wasn't for them.
Yeah.
And we just decided, like, as a group, we said, we love you. It's okay. And if that changes and you want to come back, the doors are always open. And so we
Mhm.
really, I tried to just keep it open. I tried to say, it's not a hard, you must be here invitation. It's really just an open, like, come and join. And I'd love to have you
Mhm.
on board if this is what feels right for you.
That's awesome.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is good, and I think a lot of times with that invitation piece, right? It's like that you can get so in our heads of like, "Hey, is this going to be weird?" But I love that kind of,
Yeah.
you just kind of had to press through and figure it out, and so thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that reality, because I think a lot of us probably find ourselves in that season of being caught up in the initial get going, right? That invitation to journey with, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely
totally.
found that people, I think, are looking for somebody to lead the way or to, like a lot of us want to do something, but we don't
Mm,
necessarily want to be the one who has to start it.
mm,
And
yeah, it's really
what's
good.
been really neat in this group, we didn't talk about this before, was that even though I kind of started it in that group of four of us, now I'm not really leading per se. Like we all are kind of we'll all step in different places, and so that was really a neat part for me, just to have these group of women who like understood, oh, this is our space now.
Yeah, that is really
Yeah.
cool to watch that kind of like evolve and change. And but yeah, I think that's a great point that you made there too. Like a lot of people are looking for something like this, but not necessarily wanting to be the one to initiate or start it off. And so that's such a good thought to ponder, right? And for us, maybe those of us watching, and I know even for myself. Well, hey, as we wrap up, is there any final encouragement or thoughts you'd like to give to those of us watching?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One would be, if you're looking at doing something like this, don't get hung up on the fact that I'm like, I want intentional friendships. Like maybe for you, it looks like I want somebody who is willing to exercise every day, or I really want to read a book, or maybe we're interested in the same hobbies or the same business ideas, or just, I think the key for me was to say, what am I looking for and needing in my life? And is there anybody out there who I could say, let's join together? And the other thing I would say is don't get hung up on the language of being a disciple maker. If that's hard for you,
Hmm.
just try like, I want to be a good friend and invite somebody into friendship with me and doing what I'm doing. Let go of that um, disciple maker language if it's a hang up for you, because discipleship doesn't have to be like this churchy thing. It's really about relationship and connection. And if you can get over that hurdle, I really think it can be transformative. At least it has been for me.
Yeah, that's so good. And yeah, thanks. I think those are good points, right? It's easy to get stuck or hung up on those words and kind of those
Sure.
ideas that can be solidified in our mind, but to kind of think outside of the box of like,
Yeah.
yeah, it really
But
like boil it down to what it is and go ahead.
it can almost be intimidating, right? Like, disciple maker, what? What am I supposed
Mm,
to, how do I check all those boxes? And when I was like,
yeah.
I just want to be a friend and reach some goals, that felt doable to me.
Hmm. Yeah. And reflect Jesus to those people in the process, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And so it's so good. Well, thank you again so much for sharing, Andrea. It's been fun just to hear your story and how kind of you've had these natural spaces that you kind of redeemed and they're just being intentional with, and now the relationships that are kind of unfolding as that goes along. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for sharing your story. I'd love to pray over you and for those of us watching,
Awesome.
and then we'll be wrapping up here. So let me pray.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course, God, we just want to take a moment to pause, to just be still before you. I know even this morning and in the midst of the things to do and all the stuff that's coming at us, it's easy to be hurrying from one thing to the next, even though we don't physically have to go anywhere. God, our minds can be racing. And so in this moment, we just want to pause and be reminded of who you are, that you are our God, that you love us, and that you are inviting us into a relationship with you, God, and sharing from that place. As we have that intimate relationship with you, God, you're inviting us to overflow from that position, from that place, in the lives of others. Would you help us to do that? Would you help us to think of what that could look like? Would your spirit guide us into the areas in which you'd like us to do that? We just thank you that we get to be a part of kingdom movement in that way, proclaiming your goodness to those around us. Would you help us to do that? Thank you for Andrea and her story and the ways that that's happening with her group of friends. We just praise you for um, just what's happening there. And I just pray, God, that you would continue to just allow that to be an intentional community where they're fighting for one another and growing in the ways that they desire to grow, and ultimately growing closer to you. That they'd see more of who you are in the midst of all that. Pray for those watching, God, that you would continue to open up ideas of where you may be inviting them to redeem a natural space or a relationship or a thing. Would you guide them in that process? We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, for those of you watching, maybe just a quick thought for you as we kind of wrap up is what maybe is a natural thing or a natural space that you're doing that you could just invite someone to do with you. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's training for a marathon. Maybe it's intentional friendship, as Andrea mentioned. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm sure we all have these things that we could redeem to just bring others along with us in that process, to reflect Jesus with them. And maybe it doesn't have to be um, a book study or a Bible study, but maybe it's really just trying to get healthy together and having good conversations in the midst of that process. So that's my idea and thought for you guys, and my encouragement would be, how can we redeem these natural spaces or these things? And so thank you guys so much again for joining us as we wrap up week 2. It's been so fun engaging with you all. We're excited to worship with you this Sunday at 10 a.m. with our online service. Would you join us here on Facebook Live or on YouTube Live? And then join us again on Monday at noon as we continue this conversation of what it looks like to live as sent ones, even as we're sheltered in place. We'll see you guys soon. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.